First part, Zarathustra's Discourses, Zarathustra's Prologue. When Zarathustra was 30, he left his home for the mountains, embracing solitude for 10 years. But one morning his heart changed. He spoke to the sun. "You great star, what would be your happiness if not for those you shine upon? For 10 years you've climbed to my cave. You'd have wearied without me. But now I'm weary of my wisdom, like a bee with too much honey. I need hands to take it. I must descend as you do at evening. Bless me, tranquil eye, so I may pour out my overflowing cup and become a man again." Thus began Zarathustra's descent. Zarathustra went down alone. In the forest, he met an old man who recognized him. "Zarathustra, you've changed. Once you carried ashes into the mountains, now you carry fire to the valleys. Do you not fear the doom of the incendiary? Why return to mankind whom I left for love of God? They're imperfect, unworthy of love." Zarathustra replied, "I love mankind and bring them gifts." The saint laughed, warning that men distrust gifts from anchorites. Better to stay in the forest among animals. But Zarathustra continued, thinking, "This saint has not heard that God is dead." In the town, Zarathustra addressed the crowd. "I teach you the Superman. Man is something to be surpassed. You've evolved from worms to men, but much in you is still worm. The Superman is the meaning of the earth. Remain true to the earth and reject those who speak of super-earthly hopes. Man is a polluted stream. The Superman is the sea that receives it without becoming impure. I teach you the Superman, who is the lightning, the frenzy." But the crowd laughed, eager for the rope dancer's performance. Zarathustra mused, "Man is a rope between animal and Superman, a dangerous crossing. I love those who live as downgoers, sacrificing themselves to the earth so that the Superman may come. I love those who labor, invent, and love their virtue, for they walk as spirit over the bridge. That Superman is the lightning, and I am a herald of his coming." But the people did not understand. Zarathustra spoke of the last man, a despicable being content with mediocrity. The earth will become small, and the last man will make everything small. He'll live longest, blink and say, "We have discovered happiness." They'll shun difficulty, seek warmth, and embrace equality to the point of madness. No shepherd, one herd. All are equal. Those who differ are mad. The last men will mock the past and blink, content in their shallow pleasures. The crowd interrupted, demanding the last man and mocking Zarathustra's teaching. He realized they did not understand him, feeling the coldness in their laughter. As the rope dancer performed between two towers, a buffoon emerged, mocking and chasing him on the rope. The buffoon leapt over the dancer, causing him to lose balance and plummet into the marketplace. The crowd scattered in terror. Zarathustra stood still as the injured man fell near him. The dying man, fearing the devil, asked Zarathustra if he could prevent his descent to hell. Zarathustra reassured him there was no devil, no hell, and promised to bury him with honor. The man, resigned, sought Zarathustra's hand in gratitude. Evening fell, and the crowd dispersed, leaving Zarathustra deep in thought beside the corpse. He lamented that human life was somber and meaningless, pondering his mission to teach men the meaning of their existence through the concept of the Superman. He realized that to the people, he was still perceived as something between a fool and a corpse. With the corpse on his shoulders, Zarathustra set out, but was warned by the buffoon to leave the town, as many hated him. The buffoon vanished, and Zarathustra continued through the dark streets, mocked by gravediggers at the town gate. Weary and hungry, he sought shelter at a hermit's house who offered him food, but dismissed the corpse. Zarathustra laid the body in a hollow tree and slept. Awakening in the forest, Zarathustra realized he needed living companions, not the dead. He would no longer speak to the herd, but seek fellow creators who could help shape the future. He vowed to part from the dead and pursue his path with creators, reapers, and rejoicers, guiding them toward the Superman. As the sun reached noon, Zarathustra saw an eagle and a serpent, his animals, circling above. Recalling the saint's words, he wished for wisdom like the serpent's and hoped his pride would accompany him if his wisdom ever failed. Thus began Zarathustra's continued descent. 1. The three metamorphoses. 3 metamorphoses of the spirit, I tell you. The spirit becomes a camel, the camel a lion, and the lion finally a child. The strong, load-bearing spirit longs for the heaviest burdens, asking, "What is heavy?" It humbles itself, mocks its wisdom, deserts its triumphs, and embraces suffering and disdain. Like a laden camel hastening into the wilderness, the spirit enters its desolation. In the wilderness, the spirit transforms into a lion, seeking freedom and lordship. It confronts its last master, the great dragon called Thou Shalt, adorned with the values of 1,000 years. The dragon declares, "All values have been created, there shall be no I will." But the lion, asserting "I will," challenges this, striving for freedom to create new values, rejecting even the holiest duties. Yet the lion alone cannot create new values. It must transform into a child, innocent, forgetful, a new beginning, a self-rolling wheel, a first movement, a holy yeah. To create, the spirit needs this childlike innocence and affirmation of life. Thus the spirit becomes a camel, the camel a lion, and the lion at last a child. 2. The academic chairs of virtue. People praised a wise man who could speak well about sleep and virtue. Zarathustra joined the youth sitting before him, and the wise man spoke, "Respect sleep and avoid those who sleep poorly. Even thieves are modest before sleep, but the night watchman is immodest. To sleep well, stay awake all day, overcome yourself 10 times, reconcile with yourself, find 10 truths, and laugh 10 times. One must possess all virtues to sleep well, and even virtues must sleep at the right time. Peace with God, neighbor, and even the devil is necessary for good sleep. Honor the government, even if crooked, it accords with good sleep. I value a good name and small treasures for good sleep, and prefer a small, timely company. The poor in spirit also promote sleep." He continued, "At night, I do not summon sleep. I reflect on my day, my overcomings, reconciliations, truths, and laughters. Then sleep, the unsummoned lord of virtues, overtakes me, stealing my thoughts and making me lie down." Zarathustra laughed in his heart, thinking, "This wise man seems a fool, but he knows how to sleep. His sleep is contagious, and his wisdom is to stay awake to sleep well. If life had no sense, this would be the desirablest nonsense. People once sought teachers of virtue for good sleep. These sages valued sleep without dreams, knowing no higher meaning of life. Such preachers still exist, but their time is past. Blessed are the drowsy, for they shall soon sleep." Thus spake Zarathustra. 3. Backworldsmen. Once, Zarathustra, like all backworldsmen, cast his fancy beyond man. The world seemed the work of a suffering god, a dream and diction of a dissatisfied creator. Good and evil, joy and woe, all appeared as mere vapors before creative eyes. The creator, seeking to forget himself, created the world, an intoxicating joy and self-forgetting. This world, eternally imperfect, was an image of contradiction, an intoxicating joy to its imperfect creator. Zarathustra realized that the God he created was human work, a fragment of man and ego. This phantom came not from beyond, but from his own ashes. When Zarathustra surpassed himself, the phantom withdrew. To believe in such phantoms now would be torment and humiliation. Suffering and impotence created all backworlds. Weariness, seeking escape, created all gods and backworlds. The body, despairing of itself and the earth, sought to escape into the other world, a concealed, inhuman void. Zarathustra teaches a new pride, urging men to carry their heads freely, giving meaning to the earth. The sick and perishing despised the body and invented the heavenly world, seeking escape from their misery. Yet, even their raptures owed themselves to the body and earth. Zarathustra is gentle to the sickly, wishing them to become convalescents and creators of higher bodies. He understands their delusions and does not scorn their consolation, but he recognizes that their faith is rooted in the body, which they despise. He urges his brethren to listen to the voice of the healthy body, a more upright and pure voice that speaks of the earth's meaning. Thus spake Zarathustra. Before, the despisers of the body, to the despisers of the body I speak. I do not wish them to learn or teach, but to bid farewell to their bodies and be silent. Body am I and soul, says the child, but the awakened one says, body am I entirely and nothing more. The soul is merely a name for something in the body. The body is a great wisdom, a plurality with one sense, a war and a peace, a flock and a shepherd. Your spirit, my brother, is a small instrument of your body's greater wisdom. You say ego and are proud, but your body, with its wisdom, does not say ego, it simply acts. The self is the true ruler behind your thoughts and feelings, dwelling in your body. It is wiser than your best wisdom. The self commands the ego to feel pain or pleasure, and the ego, in turn, thinks of ways to end pain or prolong pleasure. The self created esteem, contempt, joy, and woe. It created the spirit as a tool for its will. Even in despising, you serve yourself, you despisers of the body. Your self wishes to die because it can no longer create beyond itself. You are angry with life and earth because you can no longer transcend yourselves. I do not follow your path, ye despisers of the body. You are no bridges to the Superman. Thus spake Zarathustra. 5. Joys and passions. My brother, when you have a virtue that is truly yours, it is unique to you. If you name and cherish it, you share it with the herd and become one with them. Instead, say, ineffable is my virtue, too high for names. Speak of it with humility. This is my good, my love, my desire, not as a divine or human law, but as something earthly I cherish. Your virtue is born of your passions, transforming them into joys. Once you had wild passions, now they are virtues and joys. You turn poisons into balm, affliction into sweet milk. If fortunate, you will have one virtue, making your path easier. Having many virtues is illustrious but burdensome, leading some to despair. War among virtues is inevitable, as each seeks the highest place, demanding your whole spirit. Jealousy among virtues is dangerous, even fatal. The one consumed by jealousy may turn against himself. Therefore, love your virtues, for you will be surpassed by them. Thus spake Zarathustra. 6. The pale criminal. Ye judges, ye do not slay until the criminal has bowed his head in contempt. The pale criminal, seeing his ego as contemptible, judges himself in his supreme moment. But there is no salvation for one who suffers from himself, except in speedy death. Your slaying should be out of pity, not revenge, justifying life and your survival. Call him enemy, not villain, invalid, not wretch, fool, not sinner. The red judge sees a robber, but I tell you, his soul craved blood, not booty. His weak reason persuaded him to rob, and now his guilt lies heavy upon him. His reason is paralyzed, his burden is too great to shake off. This man is a mass of diseases, wild serpent seeking prey. His soul interpreted his suffering as murderous desire. He now seeks to inflict pain with what pains him. In other ages, doubt and the will to self were evil, leading the invalid to become a heretic or sorcerer. Your good people disgust me, not for their evil, but for their lack of a madness like this pale criminal's. Their virtue is for long life and self-complacency, not truth or justice. I am a railing alongside the torrent. Grasp me if you can, but I am not your crutch. Thus spake Zarathustra. 7. Reading and writing. I love only what is written with blood. Write with blood, and you will find spirit. Understanding unfamiliar blood is difficult. I despise idle readers. Writers who know their readers do nothing more for them. Another century of readers and spirit will stink. Reading ruins writing and thinking. Spirit, once divine, now becomes common. Those who write in blood do not wish to be read, but learned by heart. Proverbs should be peaks, spoken to those who are big and tall. The atmosphere should be pure, danger near, and the spirit joyful and wicked. Courage creates goblins to laugh at. I no longer share your perspective. While you seek exaltation above, I look down from it. Who can laugh and be exalted? Only those who climb the highest mountains laugh at tragedy. Wisdom wants us courageous, scornful, coercive. She loves warriors. Life is hard, but do not pretend to be delicate. We are not like the trembling rosebud. We love life not from habit, but because we are accustomed to love. There is madness in love, but also method. I find happiness in the light, foolish, lively things like butterflies and bubbles. I would believe in a God who knows how to dance. My devil was serious, the spirit of gravity. Through him all things fall. Not by wrath, but by laughter do we slay. Let us slay the spirit of gravity. I learned to walk, then to run, then to fly. Now I am light, I fly, I see myself beneath myself. A God dances in me. Thus spake Zarathustra. 8. The tree on the hill. Zarathustra noticed a youth avoiding him and found him sitting by a tree, gazing wearily into the valley. Zarathustra approached and said, If I tried to shake this tree, I couldn't, but the unseen wind bends it. We are troubled by invisible forces. The youth, startled, confessed he had been thinking of Zarathustra. Zarathustra replied, The more man seeks height and light, the more his roots pull him downward into darkness. The youth, distressed, admitted he no longer trusted himself, since striving for the heights. He felt isolated, ashamed of his struggles, and tired of his ambition. Zarathustra observed the lonely tree and remarked, This tree stands high above man and beast, waiting perhaps for lightning. The youth then exclaimed that he had longed for destruction and saw Zarathustra as the lightning he had awaited, weeping bitterly. Zarathustra comforted him, saying, "You seek freedom but are not yet free. Your soul thirsts for the stars, but your bad impulses also crave freedom. You are still a prisoner, devising liberty for yourself. Beware of losing your highest hope. Noble you are, but a noble one stands in the way of others. The noble seeks to create something new, while the good man preserves the old. Do not become a scoffer or destroyer. Maintain your highest hope and keep the hero in your soul." Thus spake Zarathustra. 9. The preachers of death. The earth is full of preachers of death, and those who should be led out of life by the promise of life eternal. These preachers come in many forms. Some are driven by destructive lusts or self-laceration, not yet truly human, longing for an end to life. Others are spiritually consumptive, dying from birth and craving doctrines of renunciation. They see life in the infirm, the old, and the dead, declaring, "Life is refuted." But it is they who are refuted, seeing only one aspect of existence. Some cling to life with bitterness or mock at their own childish grasp on it, believing life to be foolish. Others preach that life is only suffering and should cease, urging self-destruction or avoidance of procreation. They believe pity should compel them to give away their lives, binding others with their chains. Those who toil and find life rough are ripe for the sermon of death, using their diligence as a means of self-forgetfulness. If they believed more in life, they would not cling to the momentary, but they lack the capacity for patience or idling. Everywhere, voices preach death, and the earth is full of those who should be led to it, whether through death or life eternal. It is all the same, if only they pass away quickly. Thus spake Zarathustra. 10. War and warriors. We do not want to be spared by our best enemies or those we love. Let me tell you the truth, my brethren in war. I love you deeply, and I am your best enemy. I know the hatred and envy in your hearts. Be great enough not to be ashamed of them. If you cannot be saints of knowledge, be warriors, the companions of such sainthood. I see many soldiers, but I long to see warriors who seek their own enemies and wage war for their thoughts. Love peace as a means to new wars, and the short peace more than the long. I advise you not to work but to fight, not to peace but to victory. Let your work be a fight and your peace a victory. It is the good war that halloweth every cause. Courage in war have achieved more than charity. Bravery, not sympathy, saves victims. To be brave is good. They may call you heartless, but your heart is true. When your soul becomes great, it becomes haughty, and in your sublimity there is wickedness. You must have enemies to hate, not to despise. Be proud of your enemies, for their successes are yours too. Let obedience be your distinction, not resistance. Thou shalt is sweeter to the warrior than I will. Your highest thought should be commanded by me. Man is something to be surpassed. Live a life of obedience and war, and do not wish to be spared. I spare you not, for I love you from my very heart, my brethren in war. Thus spake Zarathustra. 11. The new idol. My brethren, where there are still peoples and herds, there are no states. The state is the coldest of all monsters, lying when it claims, "I am the people." Creators made peoples and served life. Destroyers created the state, laying snares and imposing cravings. Where there is a people, the state is hated as a sin against laws and customs. Each people speaks its own language of good and evil, but the state lies in all languages. The state confuses good and evil, driven by a will to death, beckoning preachers of death. It entices the many too many, swallowing them and calling itself the greatest on earth. It whispers lies even to great souls, luring them to worship the new idol. It seeks to buy the virtues of heroes, glorifying itself as life while serving death. The state poisons all, turning everything into sickness and trouble. The superfluous ones steal, sicken, and seek power, clambering like apes towards the throne, where filth often sits. My brethren, escape the fumes and idolatry of the superfluous. Open still remains the earth for great souls, where a free life begins, blessed by moderate poverty. There, where the state ceases, begins the man who is not superfluous, and the song of the necessary ones, the melody of the Superman. Thus spake Zarathustra. 12. The flies in the marketplace. Flee, my friend, into solitude. The noise of the great men and the stings of the little ones have overwhelmed you. In solitude, like the tree you love, you can find peace. Where solitude ends, the marketplace begins, filled with the noise of actors and the buzzing of flies. The people admire the representers, not the creators of new values. Around the actors revolves the crowd, but around the creators, the world invisibly turns. The actor believes only in himself, changing beliefs daily, and sees blood as the best argument. In the marketplace, the clattering buffoons are glorified as great men. They press you for a simple yea or nay, but truth does not cling to absolutes. Retreat from the marketplace. True greatness and new values are born away from fame. Flee from the poisonous flies, from the small and pitiable ones. They seek your blood, stinging in innocence, and their praise is obtrusive. They think much about you, suspecting you, and punish you for your virtues. They repay your gentleness with malice, hating your silent pride. In your presence, they feel small, their baseness glowing in vengeance. You are their bad conscience, making them more poisonous. Flee into solitude, where a strong breeze blows. It is not your lot to be a fly flap. Thus spake Zarathustra. 13. Chastity. I love the forest. Cities are bad to live in, filled with the lustful. Better to fall into a murderer's hands than into the dreams of a lustful woman. These men know nothing better than lying with a woman. Filth lies in their souls, even if it has spirit. I counsel not to slay your instincts, but to embrace innocence in them. Chastity can be a virtue, but for many, it is nearly a vice. Doggish lust hides in their virtue, begging for spirit when denied flesh. Your love of tragedies and fellow suffering masks cruel eyes and hidden lust. Some who sought to cast out their devil became swine themselves. For those whom chastity is difficult, it can lead to hell, to filth and soul lust. The truly chaste are gentle, laughing at chastity's folly. They did not seek chastity, it came to them, and they let it stay as long as it will. Thus spake Zarathustra. 14. The friend. One is always too many, thinks the anchorite. I and me are too much alone. A friend is needed. The friend of the anchorite is the third, the one who keeps the conversation from sinking into depths. Our faith in others reflects our desire for self-faith. The longing for a friend often masks our vulnerabilities and envies. True reverence may prefer an enemy over soliciting friendship. To have a friend, one must also be capable of being an enemy and honoring the enemy in one's friend. In friendship, one must remain authentic, yet this honesty can be unsettling. Your friend is an imperfect mirror of yourself. In silence and intuition, the friend must be skilled. Not everything should be seen. Pity should be careful, hidden, and strong, showing delicacy and sweetness. Are you a liberator or a tyrant? A slave cannot be a friend, nor can a tyrant. Women as yet are not capable of friendship. They know only love, often unjust and blind. Friendship demands more than love, something beyond comradeship. Thus spake Zarathustra. 15. The 1,001 Goals. Zarathustra saw many lands and peoples, discovering their differing views of good and bad. He found that no greater power exists on earth than these values. Every people has its own table of values, which they hold as sacred and indispensable. What is revered by one people is often scorned by another. Values are tied to a people's needs, land, sky, and neighbors, reflecting their path to greatness and survival. Each people created their values to maintain themselves. Values did not come from heaven but were human creations. Valuing is creating, and through valuation, things gain meaning. The change in values reflects the change in those who create. The individual as a creator is a recent development, while peoples once created values as a collective. The loving ones, those who create with love and wrath, brought forth good and bad. Zarathustra marveled at this power of praising and blaming. Yet humanity lacks a single goal, and without it, humanity itself is incomplete. Thus spake Zarathustra. 16. Neighbor love. You crowd around your neighbor, but your neighbor love is just a bad love of yourselves. You flee from yourselves to your neighbor, disguising your self-unlove as virtue. The thou is older than the I, so you seek closeness to others instead of embracing yourselves. I advise not neighbor love, but neighbor flight, and love for the furthest and future ones. Higher than love for men is love for things and phantoms. You seek validation from others because you don't love yourselves enough. You mislead your neighbor to think well of you, so you can think well of yourselves. I don't teach neighbor love, but the love of a true friend, a friend who is a festival of the earth, a foretaste of the Superman, the friend with an overflowing heart, in whom the world stands complete, who creates and bestows a complete world. Let the future and the furthest be the motive of your today. In your friend, love the Superman as your goal. My brethren, I advise you to furthest love, not neighbor love. Thus spake Zarathustra. 17. The way of the creating one. Would you go into isolation, my brother? Seek the way to yourself? The herd warns against isolation, but you must confront your own conscience and strength. Are you a new authority, capable of commanding your own will and setting your own law? Freedom is not just escape, but knowing what you are free for. Isolation will all challenge you. Pride and courage will wane, and you may despair. You must endure envy, disdain, and injustice from others as you rise. The higher you go, the more you'll be hated, especially by the good and just. They cannot tolerate those who create their own virtue. Be wary of the simplicity and the assaults of love. The recluse must be cautious, offering a paw with claws instead of a hand. Your worst enemy will always be yourself, lurking within. You go the way of the Creator, burning in your own flame to be reborn. You go the way of the lover, loving and despising yourself. Only through creation and love will you surpass yourself. With your love in creating, go into isolation. Justice will follow you, but only after you have created beyond yourself. Thus spake Zarathustra. 18. Old and young women. Why do you move so furtively, Zarathustra? What do you hide under your mantle? Is it a treasure or a child? Zarathustra replied, It is a little truth, like a naughty child that screams if I don't hold its mouth. Zarathustra recounted meeting an old woman who asked him to speak about women. He told her, Woman is a riddle with one solution, pregnancy. For man, woman is a dangerous plaything. For woman, man is a means to a child. The true man seeks danger and diversion, while woman is for the warrior's recreation. Let women seek the Superman in their love, with valor and honor. Woman should fear when she loves, for she sacrifices everything. When she hates, she is meaner than man. Man's happiness is in I will, and woman's in he will. Woman's soul is a stormy surface, while man's is deep and hidden. The old woman, impressed, said, Zarathustra knows little about women, yet he is right. She offered a small truth in return. Thou goest to women? Do not forget thy whip. Thus spake Zarathustra. 19. The bite of the adder. One day, Zarathustra fell asleep under a fig tree and was bitten by an adder. The snake, recognizing him, tried to flee, but Zarathustra thanked it for waking him. The adder warned that its poison was fatal, but Zarathustra dismissed the threat and told it to take its poison back. When Zarathustra shared this story with his disciples, they asked for its moral. He replied that he is called the destroyer of morality. Instead of returning good for evil, prove that your enemy has done you some good. It is better to be angry than to shame someone, and when cursed, curse a little too. If a great injustice befalls you, quickly commit 5 small ones. Shared injustice is half justice. A small revenge is more humane than none, and punishment should be an honor to the transgressor. Nobler is it to admit being wrong than to insist on being right. Zarathustra disliked cold justice, preferring love that sees and forgives. He questioned how to be just from the heart and declared it enough to give others what is his own. He warned against harming an anchorite, for they cannot forget or requite. If you injure an anchorite, you should kill him too. Thus spake Zarathustra. 20. Child and marriage. I have a question for you, my brother. Do you desire a child and marriage? Are you worthy of this desire? Are you the master of your passions and virtues, or does necessity or discord speak in you? I want your victory and freedom to long for a child. You should build beyond yourself, creating a higher being. Marriage should be the will of two to create something greater than themselves, not the shallow unions of the many too many. What the superfluous ones call marriage, full of poverty of soul, self-complacency, and folly, is not true marriage. I do not like such marriages where people choose poorly and become trapped in lies or foolishness. True love should be a torch guiding you to higher paths, beyond yourselves. It should create a longing for the Superman. Is this your will to marriage, my brother? Such a will and such a marriage I call holy. Thus spake Zarathustra. 21. Voluntary death. Many die too late and some too early. Zarathustra teaches, die at the right time. Those who never live at the right time can never die at the right time. I show you the consummating death, which becomes a stimulus and promise to the living. The best death is one that consecrates the oaths of the living. The next best is to die in battle, sacrificing a great soul. Praise to the voluntary death that comes when it's wanted, when one has a goal and an heir, and reverence for them. One must leave when one's best, to be long loved. Many hang on too long, rotting on their branches. Would that a storm came to shake off the rottenness. I hear only slow death preached, but I desire preachers of speedy death. Too early died that Hebrew Jesus before he could learn to live, love the earth, and laugh. He was immature and would have disavowed his doctrine if he had reached my age. In man, there is more of the child and less melancholy, better understanding of life and death. Die in a way that your spirit and virtue still shine like an afterglow. That your death may not reproach life or the earth, I ask this from the honey of your soul. I will die in such a way that you, my friends, may love the earth more. I throw you the golden ball of my goal, be its heirs. Thus spake Zarathustra. 22. The bestowing virtue. When Zarathustra left the town called the Pied Cow, many disciples followed him. At a crossroads, he told them he wished to go alone. They gave him a staff with a serpent twining around the sun, which Zarathustra accepted joyfully. He spoke to them about the value of gold, likening it to the highest virtue, rare, beaming, and self-bestowing. He urged his disciples to strive for this bestowing virtue, which elevates the soul and transforms selfishness into a healthy, holy force. He warned against the selfishness of the sick, which seeks to steal rather than give. He encouraged his disciples to create new values, elevate themselves, and become creators of a new good and evil. Their virtues should arise from a deep, overflowing spirit, leading them to love the earth and give it a new human meaning. Zarathustra then paused, advising his disciples to go away and find themselves, warning them to guard against idolizing him. He told them to lose him and discover their own path. Only when they have denied him will he return to them as a true friend, to celebrate the great noontide, the moment when humanity advances toward the Superman, embracing the death of all gods and the birth of a new hope. Thus spake Zarathustra. Thus spake Zarathustra. Second part, 23. The Child with the Mirror. Zarathustra returned to the solitude of his cave, waiting like a sower who has scattered his seed. His soul grew impatient with longing for those he loved, for he had much to give. Over months and years, his wisdom increased and brought him pain. One morning, he awoke troubled by a dream where a child showed him a mirror. In it, he saw not himself, but a devil's grimace. He understood the dream. His doctrine was in danger, distorted by enemies. He realized it was time to seek his lost friends. Zarathustra rose, inspired, with bliss spreading across his face. He felt transformed, filled with happiness, and ready to speak and bestow love on both friends and enemies. His love overflowed, rushing like a stream from the mountains into the valleys, finding new paths and new speech. He was weary of old tongues and sought new ways to express his joy and wisdom. He embraced the storm of his happiness, leaping into it with wild energy, eager to find the happy isles where his friends and enemies dwelled. His happiness came like a storm, bringing freedom, and he anticipated that both friends and enemies might be alarmed by his wild wisdom. Yet he longed to lure them back, to rest his wisdom on their hearts and love. Thus spake Zarathustra. 24. In the happy isles. The figs fall, sweet and ripe, breaking their red skins. I am the north wind to ripe figs, and my doctrines fall like. Imbibe their juice, my friends. It is autumn, a time of abundance and clear skies. Once people said God when they looked upon distant seas. Now I teach you to say Superman. God is a conjecture. Do not let your conjectures surpass your creative will. You can create the Superman, or transform into the fathers of the Superman. Let your conjecturing be limited to the conceivable. Create the world through your reason, likeness, will, and love. Without that hope, life would be unbearable. If there were gods, how could I endure not being one? Therefore, there are no gods. God is a thought that distorts reality, making all that is straight crooked. Such conjecture brings sickness to the mind and body. Evil is all teaching about the imperishable and unmoved. Instead, let the best similes speak of time and becoming, praising and justifying perishability. Creation is the great salvation from suffering, but it requires suffering and transformation. Much dying must occur in your life, ye creators, for you to justify all perishableness. To be a creator, one must also endure the pains of creation. My will emancipates me, bringing comfort. True willing is the doctrine of will and emancipation. My will drives me away from God and gods. What would there be to create if there were gods? My creative will impels me to man, like a hammer to stone, to reveal the image within. The beauty of the Superman is my vision. What are the gods to me now? Thus spake Zarathustra. 25. The pitiful. A satire has arisen on your friend. Behold Zarathustra. Walks he not among us as if among animals? But it is better said, the discerning one walks among men as among animals. Man is the animal with red cheeks, often shamed. Shame is the history of man, and the noble one practices bashfulness in the presence of all sufferers. I dislike the merciful who find bliss in pity. They lack bashfulness. If I must be pitiful, I prefer to do so at a distance, shrouding my head to avoid recognition. I hope my path crosses with those unafflicted, with whom I can share joy and hope. Humanity has enjoyed itself too little. That is our original sin. When we learn to enjoy ourselves better, we also unlearn how to cause pain. Helping the sufferer often wounds his pride. Great obligations do not make one grateful, but revengeful. Small kindnesses can become gnawing burdens. Be shy in accepting, distinguish by accepting. I willingly bestow as a friend to friends. Beggars should be done away with, as they cause annoyance whether one gives or not. The worst are petty thoughts. They creep and infect, withering the soul. Better to rear up one's devil than be consumed by pettiness. Living among men is difficult because silence is difficult. We are often unfair not to those who offend us, but to those who do not concern us. If a friend wrongs you, forgive him for what he did to you, but know that you cannot forgive what he did to himself. Great love surpasses forgiveness and pity. Pity can cause great suffering. Even God, out of pity for man, died. Be warned against pity, it brings heavy clouds. All great love is above pity, for it seeks to create what is loved. Myself do I offer unto my love, and my neighbor as myself. Such is the language of all creators. All creators are hard. Thus spake Zarathustra. 26. The priests. Zarathustra spoke to his disciples. Here are priests my enemies, but pass them quietly with sleeping swords. Some are heroes who have suffered much, and now make others suffer. Their meekness is revengeful, and they taint those who touch them. Yet I want to see my blood honored in theirs. As they passed, Zarathustra felt pain and spoke. These priests, prisoners of false values, suffer in fetters imposed by their so-called savior. They believed they landed on safe ground, but found a slumbering monster, false values and empty words. Their churches are sweet-smelling caves, suffocating the soul. They call God what oppresses them, worshiping with hero spirit, but nailing men to crosses. Their lives are like corpses, their songs heavy with charnel house stench. They preach penitence from a place of affliction, not from freedom or knowledge. Their saviors were born of defects, drowning in pity. They drove their flock as if there was only one path to the future, but they were of the flock themselves. They wrote their truth in blood, but blood taints the purest teachings. Greater ones than these saviors must save you, my brethren, if you seek freedom. The greatest man and the smallest are still too similar, still all too human. Thus spake Zarathustra. 27. The virtuous. One must speak loudly to awaken dull senses, but beauty speaks gently to the most awakened souls. My shield laughed today at the virtuous ones, who seek reward for their virtue, longing for payment and heaven in return for their deeds. But this is my sorrow. Reward and punishment have infiltrated the depths of your souls. Your virtue should be like a mother's love, pure and self-sufficient, not seeking payment. True virtue is a part of your very self, not an external cloak. Yet many distort virtue, seeing it as suffering under a lash, slothfulness of vices, or mere ticking like a clock. Some call their small righteousness virtue, using it to hurt others, while others sit quietly in their swamps, calling avoidance of conflict virtue. Many claim to know virtue, but their understanding is shallow. Zarathustra did not come to argue with these fools, but to make you weary of old words like reward, retribution, and punishment. Your actions should be like a mother and her child, your true self in your deeds. I have taken away your old formulas and playthings, but new ones will come. bringing comfort and new discoveries. Thus spake Zarathustra. 28. The rabble. Life is a well of delight, but where the rabble drink, all fountains are poisoned. I hate the unclean grinning into the fountain, poisoning the holy water with their lust. The flame sputters, the fruit withers in their hands, and many turn from life to avoid sharing with the rabble. Some flee to the wilderness or destroy fields just to escape the rabble's taint. The hardest question, is the rabble necessary for life? Must there be poisoned fountains, stinking fires, and maggots in the bread of life? My loathing gnawed at me, seeing even the rabble become spiritual. I turned from rulers who bargain for power with the rabble. I lived deaf, blind, and dumb to avoid the scribe rabble, power rabble, and pleasure rabble. But something freed me from loathing, giving me wings to fly where no rabble drink. I found the well of delight on the loftiest height, where my summer heart burns with happiness. Here none of the rabble drink with me, and the well laughs back with purity. We build our nest on the tree of the future, untouched by the impure. We live like strong winds, neighbors to eagles, snow in the sun. One day, I will blow among them, taking their breath with my spirit. Strong wind is Zarathustra to all low places. Take care not to spit against the wind. Thus spake Zarathustra. 29. The tarantulas. This is the tarantula's den. See its web tremble. The tarantula, with its symbol of revenge, poisons souls with its bite, making them giddy with vengeance. I speak in parables to you preachers of equality who secretly harbor revenge. I will expose your lies and tear at your web, for redemption from revenge is my highest hope. The tarantulas speak of justice as vengeance, and their will to equality disguises their impotence and envy. Their rage leads them too far, their souls lacking honey, and their talk of justice reveals their Pharisaic nature. Distrust those who are driven by the impulse to punish, for they are of bad lineage. I reject those who preach life while hiding from it, those who once were heretic burners and now preach equality to harm the powerful. For me, justice speaks, men are not equal, and neither shall they become so. My love for the Superman demands inequality and struggle. Life itself requires elevation, steps, and variance. It strives to surpass itself. Even here, where the tarantula's den lies, an ancient temple teaches that struggle and inequality exist in beauty. Let us strive divinely against one another, my friends. Alas, the tarantula has bitten me too. It seeks punishment and justice, trying to make me dizzy with revenge. But I will not succumb. Bind me fast to this pillar. I will be a pillar saint rather than a whirl of vengeance. Thus spake Zarathustra. 30. The famous wise ones. You famous wise ones have served the people and their superstitions, not the truth. The people revere you because you justify their beliefs, disguising your unbelief as a pleasantry. The free spirit, hated by the people, lives outside their fetters and is hunted like a wolf. The people's will to truth is merely a justification for their reverence. You have always been stiff-necked advocates of the people, and many powerful ones have used you to their advantage. But now I urge you to shed the lion's skin, the facade of the conqueror and investigator. True conscientiousness lies in breaking free from venerating the people and their gods, in embracing the wilderness where free spirits dwell. In the cities, you remain as well-fed servants, pulling the people's carts. Though you have advanced the people's spirit, you are still the people to me, blind to what true spirit is. Spirit is life that cuts into life, growing through its own suffering. You know only sparks of the spirit, not the anvil and hammer that forge it. You have never experienced the cold, deep knowledge of the spirit or its wild wisdom. You stand stiff and respectable, unaware of the strong winds that drive true wisdom across the sea. My wild wisdom trembles with the violence of the spirit, but you, servants of the people, cannot follow me. Thus spake Zarathustra. 31. The night song. 'Tis night. The gushing fountains speak louder, and so does my soul, longing for expression and love. Light am I, but I wish to be night, to embrace the darkness and the stars. I live in my own light, always giving, never knowing the joy of receiving. My abundance brings a craving for wickedness, a desire to take back what I have given. My happiness in bestowing has waned, and my hand has grown callous. The lonesomeness of all bestowers, the silence of the shining ones, suns circle in desert space, cold and relentless, speaking only to the dark. I thirst for the night, for the warmth and companionship of darkness. 'Tis night, and my soul longs to speak, to sing the song of a loving one. Thus sang Zarathustra. The Dance Song. One evening, Zarathustra and his disciples came upon maidens dancing in a meadow. When the maidens saw him, they paused, but Zarathustra reassured them, saying he was no enemy of their dances. He spoke of the little god of love asleep by the well, and promised to sing a song to accompany their dance, a satire on the spirit of gravity, the world's greatest foe. As Cupid and the maidens danced, Zarathustra sang of life, wild and changeable, who laughed at him when he called her unfathomable. He confessed his love for life, even when he hated her, and his fondness for wisdom, who reminded him of life. Life mocked him for confusing the two, but he admitted they were alike, both seductive and elusive. When the dance ended, Zarathustra grew sad. The sun had set, and a coolness came from the forest. He felt an unknown presence and questioned the purpose of his continued existence. The evening had brought on his melancholy, and he asked his friends to forgive him for it. Thus sang Zarathustra. 33. The Grave Song. Zarathustra sailed to the grave island where the graves of his youth lay. Reflecting on his lost loves and dreams, he lamented their early demise, taken by malice to wound him. He placed a wreath on their graves, cursing those who stole his visions and joy. Once, his youth's wisdom declared, "All days holy," but his enemies tainted his nights with sleepless torture. They turned his closest ones into sources of loathing, polluted his victories, and embittered his best efforts. His highest hopes and grandest parables remained unspoken, slain by the discordant tunes of a once beloved minstrel. Yet through all the loss and wounds, something invulnerable remained, his will. Strong and unyielding, it survived and rose above the graves, hopeful and determined to demolish all tombs, for where there are graves, there are resurrections. Thus sang Zarathustra. 34. Self-surpassing. You call it the will to truth, but I call it the will to power, the desire to make all being thinkable and subject to your will. You seek to create a world you can worship, driven by your ultimate hope for power. The people, unaware, follow your values of good and evil, which are rooted in an ancient will to power. I followed life and learned that all living things obey and command, driven by the will to power. Even the servant desires mastery, and the greatest risk their lives for power. Life itself whispered to me, I am that which must ever surpass itself. This will to power transcends even life. It seeks not existence but power. Good and evil, too, must surpass themselves, for they are not eternal. Your values serve your secret love for power, and from them a stronger power will emerge, breaking old values. The creator of good and evil must first be a destroyer. The greatest good and evil are intertwined in the act of creation. Let us speak of this, for silence is worse. Suppressed truths become poisonous. Many houses are still to be built. Thus spake Zarathustra. 35. The Sublime Ones. Calm is the bottom of my sea, hiding droll monsters and sparkling enigmas. Today I saw a solemn, sublime one, burdened with ugly truths and thorns, but no roses. He has not yet learned laughter or beauty, returning from the forest of knowledge still haunted by a wild beast within. He sits, too, long in the shade, pale and starved on expectations, with contempt in his eyes. Only when he turns away from himself will he find true beauty and happiness. His hero must be unlearned, and his knowledge must learn to smile. Gracefulness belongs to the magnanimous, and beauty is the hardest for the powerful to attain. When power becomes gracious and visible, I call it beauty. The sublime one must strive to be beautiful, to hold up a mirror to his own beauty, and then the superhero will approach in dreams. Thus spake Zarathustra. 36. The Land of Culture. I flew too far into the future, and horror seized me. Returning to the present, I came to you, present-day men, with longing in my heart. But what did I find? A motley-colored spectacle. I laughed despite my fear at the sight of you, painted and masked, reflecting yourselves in 50 mirrors. You are covered in the characters of the past, layered with new ones, hiding your true selves. You are made of colors and glued scraps, with all times and peoples gazing out from your veils. Strip away your masks, and there would be nothing left but a skeleton, which once scared me away. I'd rather toil among the shades of the bygone than endure you, present-day men, whether naked or clothed. You call yourselves real, devoid of faith and superstition, yet you are untrustworthy and unfruitful. Lacking belief, you are like half-open doors where grave diggers wait. Your reality is that everything deserves to perish. You marvel at yourselves, yet your poverty of spirit is evident. You are laughable to me, and I must lighten your load, for my weariness does not arise from you. I search for a home, but find none among you. I love only my children's land, the undiscovered in the remotest sea, where I bid my sails to search. I will make amends to the future for this present day. Thus spake Zarathustra. 37. Immaculate perception. Last night I imagined the moon bearing a son, but it deceived me. I mistrust the moon, that covetous monk, jealous of the earth and lover's joys. It sneaks dishonestly across the sky like those who hide their desires beneath a mask of purity. You, pure discerners, are no different, covetous of the earth while pretending to despise it. Your spirit is ashamed of serving your desires, so it lies and calls itself contemplation. You wish to see life without desire, like the moon, but lack the innocence of true creation. You defame desire because you lack it. True beauty and innocence lie in the will to create beyond oneself, in loving and perishing for something greater. But you, emasculated and afraid, call your cowardly ogling beauty and deceive yourselves. You hang a god's mask before you, hiding the coiling serpent within. Even I, Zarathustra, was once deceived by your godlike appearance, not seeing the filth and deception beneath. But now, the moon's love affair is ending. The sun rises with its pure, creative desire for the earth. Like the sun, I love life and seek to bring all that is deep to my height. Thus spake Zarathustra. 38 Scholars. While I slept, a sheep ate the ivy wreath from my head and declared, Zarathustra is no longer a scholar. It left proudly, and a child told me of it. I like to lie where children play, among thistles and poppies, innocent in their wickedness. But to the sheep I am no longer a scholar, for I have left the house of scholars and slammed the door behind me. I love freedom and fresh air, not the dusty rooms of scholars. They sit cool in the shade, content to be spectators, watching the thoughts of others. They raise a dust when disturbed, but who would guess it comes from summer's corn? Their wisdom often chills me, and I've heard the frog croak in it. They are clever with their fingers, weaving the hose of the spirit, and like clockworks, they function when wound up. They grind corn into dust, keep sharp eyes on each other, and prepare poison with care. They play with false dice, alien to me in their virtues and falsehoods. I lived above them, so they disliked me, putting barriers between us to muffle my tread. Yet I still walk above them, even on my errors, for men are not equal, and what I will they may not. Thus spake Zarathustra. 39. Poets. Since I have known the body better, said Zarathustra, the spirit is merely symbolic, and the imperishable is but a simile. His disciple asked why he once said that poets lie too much. Zarathustra replied, we poets do lie too much because we know too little and are bad learners. We adulterate our work, seeking the eternally feminine in simple things, believing in the wisdom of the people and in nature's whispered secrets. Poets are drawn to the clouds, creating gods and symbols that are light enough for their imaginary realms. Zarathustra grew weary of this superficiality, tired of poets who muddle their waters to seem deep. He found them to be mediaries, mixing and diluting truth. Even when he cast his net into their sea, he drew up only the head of some ancient god, not what he sought. Zarathustra lamented the vanity of poets, comparing them to the sea and its peacock-like display. He foresaw a time when poets would become weary of themselves, turning inward as penitents of the spirit. Thus spake Zarathustra. 40. Great events. Near Zarathustra's happy isles lies an isle with a smoking volcano, believed by the people to guard the gate to the netherworld. One day, as a ship's crew hunted rabbits on this isle, they saw Zarathustra fly past, heading toward the volcano, and heard a voice say, "It is time. It is the highest time." The sailors were shocked and believed Zarathustra was going to hell. Rumors spread that Zarathustra had disappeared, causing unease, but he returned after 5 days. Zarathustra spoke of the fire dog, a symbol of shallow, noisy rebellion. He challenged the fire dog, saying it drinks from the surface and spews empty words. True great events, he argued, happen in silence, not with noise and smoke. The fire dog, like the state, pretends to speak from the heart of things but is full of envy and deceit. Zarathustra then told of another fire dog, one that breathes gold and laughter, drawn from the heart of the earth, which is made of gold. This fire dog rejects the noise and dregs, valuing joy and true wealth. As Zarathustra finished, his disciples eagerly told him of the sailors and the flying man. Zarathustra wondered if he was a ghost or if his shadow had caused the commotion. He pondered why the ghost cried, "It is time, it is the highest time." Thus spake Zarathustra. 41. The Soothsayer. Zarathustra observed a great sadness among mankind, as the best grew weary and a doctrine spread. All is empty, all is alike, all has been. People lamented their fruitless labor, and even dying seemed too burdensome. Zarathustra was deeply troubled by this, and fell into a sorrowful state, abstaining from food and drink for days. Finally he fell into a deep sleep, during which he had a disturbing dream. In the dream, Zarathustra was a night watchman in a fortress of death, surrounded by coffins and silence. A terrifying wind burst open the gate, throwing a black coffin at him, which exploded into mocking laughter and grotesque caricatures. His own cry of horror woke him. Upon waking, Zarathustra shared the dream with his disciples. One disciple interpreted it, saying that Zarathustra himself is the wind that opens the gates of death, bringing laughter and life into the sepulchres. His laughter will overpower the forces of death and despair, and even in the long twilight of weariness, Zarathustra will not disappear but will continue to advocate for life. Zarathustra, realizing the truth of the interpretation, shook off his sadness, called for a feast, and resolved to make amends for his bad dreams. Thus spake Zarathustra. 42. Redemption. As Zarathustra crossed the great bridge, cripples and beggars surrounded him. A hunchback challenged him, saying that for people to fully believe in Zarathustra's teachings, he must first convince the cripples by healing them. Zarathustra responded that taking a hump from a hunchback would also take away his spirit, and healing the blind or the lame would bring them more misery, as people teach. Zarathustra reflected on seeing people as fragments and limbs, broken and scattered like on a battlefield. Zarathustra saw himself as a seer and creator, striving to redeem the past and turn "it was" into "thus I will it." Yet he acknowledged the folly in the human will, which desires to go backward and seeks revenge against time for what cannot be undone. He warned against the spirit of revenge, which claims that all things deserve to perish because they cannot escape the past. Zarathustra paused in his discourse, alarmed by his thoughts, then laughed and remarked on the difficulty of living among men because of the challenge of silence. The hunchback, who had been listening, asked why Zarathustra spoke differently to his disciples than to others. Zarathustra replied that one must speak differently to hunchbacks, just as one might tell tales out of school to pupils. Thus spake Zarathustra. 43. Manly prudence. It is not the height that is terrible, but the declivity, where the gaze shoots downwards and the hand grasps upwards. My heart's double will. I strive for the summit, but cling to man. I live blindly among men to not lose belief in firmness, even as I bind myself to them to reach the Superman. I allow myself to be deceived by men so that I am not pulled away from them. To endure among men, one must learn to drink from all glasses and wash in dirty water. I console myself by being more forbearing to the vain than the proud. Vanity, though often tragic, cures my melancholy and keeps me attached to man. The vain man's modesty is unconscious, and he feeds on others' praise, seeking belief in himself. I am not put off by the wicked. In them, I see the potential for greatness and the possibility of the super dragon for the Superman. The future holds more than the evils we know, and I laugh at the fear of the devil among the good and just. The Superman's goodness would be frightening to them, and I suspect they would call him a devil. I grew tired of the highest and best ones, and longed to soar into distant futures, beyond where even gods are ashamed of their clothes. Yet I choose to remain disguised among men, so that I may mistake them and myself, a final manly prudence. Thus spake Zarathustra. 44. The stillest hour. Zarathustra, troubled and unwilling, tells his friends he must return to solitude, driven by his inner voice, his stillest hour. This voice revealed his struggle. His heart is terrified, his will divided between striving for greatness and clinging to humanity. He is commanded to speak his truth, but he resists, feeling unworthy and unable. The voice urges him to command great things, but Zarathustra doubts his ability, lacking the lion's voice. The voice insists that it is the quietest words that bring the storm, and Zarathustra must lead as a shadow of what is to come. Still he resists, saying, "I will not." Finally, the voice tells him he is not yet ripe for his own fruits and must return to solitude to mature. After this revelation, Zarathustra weeps, overwhelmed by the pain of departure. That night, he leaves his friends, going away alone. Third part, 45, The Wanderer. Around midnight, Zarathustra ascended the ridge to reach the coast by morning, where he intended to embark. Reflecting on his solitary wanderings, he said to his heart, "I am a wanderer and mountain climber. I love not the plains. My path is one of wandering and self-discovery. I now stand before my last summit, my hardest path, my loneliest wandering. Summit and abyss are now together. My path to greatness is my refuge, my courage. There is no path behind me. I must climb upon my own head and beyond my heart." He acknowledged that indulgence weakens, praising instead what hardens. To see the ground of everything, I must ascend above myself, even above my stars. My final summit is to look down upon myself and my stars. Comforting his sore heart with harsh maxims, Zarathustra reached the top and beheld the sea below. He stood silent, recognizing his destiny. My last lonesomeness has begun. Before my highest mountain, I must first go deeper down, into the darkest flood of pain. Out of the deepest, the highest comes. As he neared the sea, weary and eager, he felt its warmth and dreams. The sea groans with evil recollections or expectations. I am sad with you, angry with myself. My hand lacks strength to free you from evil dreams. He laughed at his folly, his love for all that lives, even monsters. Yet thinking of his abandoned friends, Zarathustra wept bitterly with anger and longing. 46. The Vision and the Enigma. When it became known among the sailors that Zarathustra was aboard, curiosity grew. For 2 days he remained silent and sad. On the second evening, his heart softened, and he began to speak to the daring adventurers on board, those who embraced danger and mysteries. He shared his vision of a lonely, difficult ascent up a barren mountain path, haunted by the spirit of gravity, a dwarf whispering doubts in his ear, dragging him downward. Zarathustra resisted, driven by courage which overcomes all fear and suffering. At a gateway named This Moment, where two eternal roads meet, Zarathustra confronted the dwarf, questioning whether time is a circle and all moments must eternally return. As he pondered this, he heard a howling dog and encountered a shepherd choking on a black serpent. Despite his efforts, Zarathustra couldn't remove the serpent, and his soul cried out, urging the shepherd to bite. The shepherd did, spitting out the serpent's head and transforming into a radiant, laughing being, no longer a mere man. Zarathustra, moved by the inhuman laughter, felt a deep longing and a gnawing thirst for that laughter which he could neither endure nor quench. Thus spake Zarathustra. 47. Involuntary bliss. With enigmas and bitterness in his heart, Zarathustra sailed on. 4 days from the happy isles, he overcame his pain and accepted his fate. He spoke to himself, exulting in his solitude. Alone am I again, with the pure heaven and open sea. I once sought companions and children of my hope, but realized I must create them myself. My children, the trees of my garden, still stand together, but one day they will stand alone, tested by storms and time. Each must prove if he is of my lineage, strong and silent, a fellow creator and companion. For them, I must perfect myself, presenting myself to every misfortune. It is time for me to leave. Desire for my children has ensnared me, and I have lost myself in them. I possess them, but I long for the frost and winter to make me crack and crunch. My past haunts me, and my abysmal thoughts weigh on me, yet I am not ready to confront them fully. One day I will find the strength and voice to call them up, and a victory will seal my perfection. Meanwhile, I sail uncertain seas, distrusting the beauty of life and happiness. Away with you, blissful hour. Bless my children instead. I stand ready for pain, yet happiness comes closer. Towards morning I laughed, mocking myself. Happiness runs after me because I do not run after women. Happiness, however, is a woman. Thus spake Zarathustra. 48. Before sunrise. O pure, deep heaven, gazing on you I tremble with divine desires. To toss myself into your height is my depth. To hide in your purity is my innocence. You reveal your wisdom through silence, veiling your stars. In your beauty and modesty you speak to my raging soul. We are old friends, sharing grief and insight, smiling our knowledge silently. Together we learned to rise above ourselves, smiling down upon constraint and guilt. My soul, in wandering and mountain climbing, sought only you. I detest the passing clouds that taint our shared vastness. I hate them for robbing us of our yea and amen. I'd rather endure tempest and thunder than soft treading doubts. From you, I learned that he who cannot bless must learn to curse. I am a blesser and a yea-sayer, striving to free my hands for blessing. My blessing is to stand above all as their heaven, their eternal security. All things are baptized in eternity, beyond good and evil. I taught the freedom of chance and wantonness over rationality, finding that all things prefer to dance on the feet of chance. O heaven, you are my divine dancing floor where gods play dice. Have I spoken unspeakable things? Or do you blush at our shared secret as day approaches? The world is deep, and not everything may be uttered in the light of day. The day comes, let us part, O modest, glowing heaven, my happiness before sunrise. Thus spake Zarathustra. 49. The bedwarfing virtue. When Zarathustra returned to the continent, he wandered and observed, jokingly, calling himself a river winding back to its source. He wanted to see if people had grown greater or smaller. Seeing new houses, he lamented, everything has become smaller. Even the doorways are low, forcing me to stoop. He spoke of how people did not forgive him for not envying their small virtues, nor for understanding their necessity. They viewed him with suspicion, and he noticed their mediocrity, shrewdness, and hypocrisy. Their virtues made them weak, and they pursued small happinesses out of fear. Zarathustra observed that their soil was too tender to grow anything great. They would perish by their small virtues, omissions, and submissions. He wished they could will with strength and love, with great love or contempt, but he realized they were not yet ready to hear his words. He concluded that they were becoming smaller and poorer, and soon they would be dry grass, longing for fire. He foresaw a time when they would herald the coming of the great noontide with flaming tongues. Thus spake Zarathustra. 50. On the olive mount. Winter, a bad guest, sits with me, turning my hands blue. I honor him, but prefer to escape to the sunny corner of my olive mount where I laugh at him. He clears my house of noise and keeps the lanes lonesome. I mock my enemies more heartily in winter, finding warmth in poverty and cold baths that grumble my stern guest. In the morning, I tickle winter with a wax taper, impatiently awaiting the clear sky. The winter sky's long silence, its ability to stifle the sun, I've learned well. My art is to conceal my depth with clear silence, outwitting those who seek to see into me. I show others only the ice and storms of my peaks, hiding the warmth of my soul. They pity me, thinking I suffer in the cold, but I run with warm feet on my olive mount, singing and mocking their pity. Thus sang Zarathustra. 51. On passing by. Zarathustra, after wandering through many lands, arrived at the gate of a great city. A fool known as the ape of Zarathustra confronted him, warning him against entering the city, where great thoughts decay and virtues are reduced to hollow gestures. The fool urged Zarathustra to turn back, decrying the city's corruption, its putrid blood, and the vices of its people. Zarathustra interrupted the fool, disgusted by his words and his swamp-like nature. He chastised the fool for his grunting and vengeful spirit, warning that his contempt was born of unflattered vanity. Zarathustra acknowledged his own loathing for the great city, but rejected the fool's bitterness, declaring that where one can no longer love, one should pass by. Thus spake Zarathustra, and he moved on, leaving the fool and the great city behind. 52. The apostates. Ah, everything that was once green and vibrant is now withered and gray. Those young hearts have grown old, not with age but with weariness, declaring, "We have again become pious." They once pursued knowledge and freedom, but now they crawl to the cross, becoming mystifiers and mumblers. Did they lose heart because of my lonesomeness? Only a few possess enduring courage. The rest are cowardly, the common and superfluous. Zarathustra reflects on the fleeting nature of belief and warns against binding one's heart to the fickle. He urges, "Let the withered leaves fall away, and do not lament." Those who have become pious again are faint-hearted, persuaded by their inner fears to believe in God. They seek refuge in darkness, setting traps for simple minds, gathering in small, concealed groups, longing to become like children again. They spend their time in futile pursuits, seeking depth where there is none, playing the harp to woo young hearts, or waiting for spirits that never come. Some have become night watchmen, waking old, forgotten beliefs, doubting God like ancient night watchmen with sorrowful horns. Zarathustra's heart writhes with laughter at their doubts, for the time of such doubts has long passed. The old gods laughed themselves to death when one declared, "There is but one God." Thus talked Zarathustra in the city he loved, near his return to his cave and animals, his soul rejoicing at the thought. 53. The return home. O lonesomeness, my home, after living wildly, I return to you with tears. You remind me of forsakenness, but also welcome me back with open arms. Here I can speak freely, unburdened by hidden feelings. Among men, I was wild and strange, even when they loved me. But here, all things come to me openly, caressing my thoughts. Forsakenness was when I stood lost beside a corpse, or when I gave endlessly among the thirsty and became thirsty myself. It was when my stillest hour drove me from myself, and I despaired. But here, in lonesomeness, everything is clear, and time runs lightly. Down there, everything is noise, misunderstanding, and betrayal. Wisdom is drowned out by the marketplace's clamor. Among men, I lived disguised, indulging their hubbub and misjudging myself to endure them. The good ones were the most poisonous, stifling free souls with their pity. I learned to conceal myself and my riches, seeing in everyone what they could bear in spirit. Now I breathe mountain freedom again, freed from the stifling air of human hubbub. My soul tickled by sharp breezes, sneezes, and shouts, "Health to thee!" Thus spake Zarathustra. 54. The three evil things. In my last morning dream, I stood on a promontory beyond the world, weighing it with scales. My dream, a bold sailor, found the world finite and measurable, like a ripe golden apple. It presented itself to me as a humanly good thing, despite all the bad said about it. To honor this dream, I now weigh the three worst cursed things: voluptuousness, passion for power, and selfishness. Voluptuousness, often cursed by ascetics and moralists, is innocent and free for the strong-willed, symbolizing higher happiness. Passion for power, feared by the timid, drives the hard-hearted and the ambitious, but also inspires great contempt and noble longing. Selfishness, often maligned, is celebrated by the powerful soul, which turns self-enjoyment into virtue. This blessed selfishness despises cowardice, bitterness, and false wisdom, rejecting the servility of slaves and the submissiveness of the fearful. It calls for a great change, a judgment, a great noontide, where the true value of selfishness will be revealed and celebrated. Thus spake Zarathustra. 55. The spirit of gravity. My words are too coarse for delicate ears. My hand scrawls foolishly, my foot tramples wildly. I am like a bird, impatient to fly, hostile to gravity. I sing alone, not for the crowd. He who teaches men to fly will change everything, but those still bound by gravity find life heavy. To become light, one must love oneself, not with sickly love, but a healthy, self-sufficient love. Most people carry too many burdens, weighted by others' values. Life feels hard because they bear too much that isn't their own. Learning to love oneself is the finest art, but we are taught to carry the heavy load of good and evil from childhood. The spirit of gravity weighs us down, making life a burden. Yet even our own burdens can be hard to bear, as many internal struggles are slippery and elusive. We must learn to have a strong outer shell to protect our inner selves. Some people call everything good and are all satisfied. I reject this. I value those who can say yes and no with discernment, not those who accept everything like swine. I love blood, not mummies or phantoms. I disdain lickspittles and parasites who live off others' love. I avoid those who must wait or trade. I learn to wait only for myself. To fly, one must first learn to stand, walk, run, climb, and dance. My way is my own. I found my truth through questioning and testing, not by following others. There is no single way for everyone. Thus spake Zarathustra. 56. Old and new tables. Here I sit, surrounded by old and half-written tables, waiting for my hour of descent to go once more unto men. I await the sign of my hour, the laughing lion with the flock of doves. Meanwhile, I speak to myself, telling my own story. When I first came to men, I found them resting on old beliefs, thinking they knew what was good and bad. I disturbed their sleep, teaching that no one yet knows what is good or bad except the Creator. I urged them to laugh at their moralists, saints, and sages, and to upset their old beliefs. I laughed at their greatness and smallness, crying and laughing with a wild wisdom, carried away into distant futures and warmer souths. It was there I discovered the word Superman, realizing that man is something to be surpassed. I taught them to create the future, to redeem the past, and to transform every it was into so did I will it. Now I await my final redemption, to go unto men for the last time, giving them my choicest gift as my sun sets. I place a new table before you, urging you not to be considerate of your neighbor, for man must be surpassed. Surpass yourself, seize your right, and do what no one else can do. Those who cannot command themselves must obey. The noble soul desires nothing gratuitously, but always considers what to give in return. Life's promise must be kept, and enjoyment should not be sought, but earned. Firstlings are always sacrificed, for our best excites old palates. We bleed on secret sacrificial altars, but I love those who do not wish to preserve themselves, the downgoing ones who go beyond. The good can never be true. They obey and do not listen to themselves. Truth is born from the seed of daring, distrust, and cruelty. The past is abandoned to reinterpretation by each new generation, but a new nobility is needed to inscribe new values on new tables. To the world weary I say, your lip still hangs with worldly wishes. You have not withdrawn from the earth. Only the incurable should not be treated. Let the weary pass away. To those who can create, I bid you break up the tables of the good and just. O my brethren, I call you to be creators, to become hard, to press your hand upon millenniums like wax, to write upon them like brass. Become hard and preserve yourself for one great victory. Thus spake Zarathustra. 57. The Convalescent. One morning, Zarathustra sprang from his couch like a madman, crying out as if something within him resisted rising. His voice was so frightening that all nearby creatures fled. Zarathustra called forth his deepest thoughts, urging them to awaken, demanding they speak to him. But after speaking, he collapsed as if dead and remained motionless for 7 days. His animals tended to him, bringing him food and staying by his side. After 7 days, Zarathustra awoke, took a rosy apple, and his animals spoke to him, urging him to leave the cave. Zarathustra listened to their words, reflecting on the beauty of speech and the connection it creates between souls. His animals reminded him of the eternal return, the cycle of existence, where everything repeats. Zarathustra smiled at their words, acknowledging the consolation he had found in singing, which he now needed to heal his soul. His animals encouraged him to prepare a new lyre for new songs, knowing he was destined to teach the doctrine of eternal return, a great and dangerous fate. They reminded him that if he were to die, he would return again, repeating the same life to teach the same truths. But for now, they urged him to continue living and singing. Zarathustra, silent and communing with his soul, did not respond. The serpent and the eagle, sensing his deep stillness, respectfully withdrew, leaving him in quiet contemplation. 58. The Great Longing. O my soul, I taught thee to embrace today as once and formerly, and to dance over every place and time. I freed thee from by-places, cleansed thee of shame and small virtues, and made thee stand naked before the sun. I swept away the clouds, the sin and the darkness from thee. I gave thee the power to say nay and yea, to remain calm through storms, and to understand the voluptuousness of the future. I taught thee to love deeply, even in contempt, and to persuade with the force of the sun. I named thee Fate and the circuit of circuits, and I filled thee with wisdom, old and new. Thou hast grown full and heavy with happiness, but now thou askest, which of us oweth thanks? Thy overabundance stretches out, longing for more, while thy smiling hides a yearning for tears. If thou wilt not weep, O my soul, then thou must sing. Sing passionately until the seas calm and the golden marvel glides upon them, toward the vintager with the diamond vintage knife, the deliverer for whom future songs will find names. I have given thee all, even my last possession, the command to sing. Now, O my soul, sing unto me, and let me thank thee. Thus spake Zarathustra. 59. The Second Dance Song. Zarathustra gazes into life's eyes, seeing gold gleaming in the night. He is captivated by her playful, elusive nature as she teases and dances away, drawing him into her pursuit. Life tempts and frustrates him, leading him on a wild chase through caves and thickets. Zarathustra, both hunter and hunted, is filled with a mix of love, frustration, and longing as he follows her. He implores life to rest, to enjoy peaceful moments together, but she remains elusive and playful, leaving him weary yet enchanted. Life responds to Zarathustra, urging him not to crack his whip so harshly, reminding him that they are both beyond good and evil, bound together by their shared existence. She accuses him of not loving her as deeply as he claims, hinting that he thinks of leaving her. They share a moment of deep connection, gazing at the evening meadow, weeping together as life becomes dearer to Zarathustra than all his wisdom. As midnight approaches, Zarathustra hears the deep voice of the night, reflecting on the profound depths of the world, its joys and its sorrows. The voice of midnight speaks of the world's deep woe and deeper joy, and of joy's longing for eternity. Thus spake Zarathustra. 60. The Seven Seals. If I am a diviner, full of the spirit that wanders between past and future, ready for the lightning of the future, then blessed is he who carries this burden. How could I not be ardent for eternity, the ring of return? I have never found the woman to have children with, except for eternity, whom I love. If ever my wrath has shattered old beliefs, if I have rejoiced in the ruins of old gods, how could I not love eternity? For I have only found love in eternity, the woman I would have children with. If I have felt the creative breath and laughed with divine laughter, if I have played dice with the gods, making the earth tremble, how could I not be passionate for eternity? Eternity, the one I love. If I have tasted life's mix of joy and sorrow, uniting good and evil, how could I not be devoted to eternity? She, whom I love, is the only one with whom I would create life. If I am drawn to the sea's boundless freedom, if I revel in the unknown, how could I not be eager for eternity? For in her alone have I found love. If my virtue dances and my wickedness laughs, how could I not be zealous for eternity? In her all heaviness becomes light, and I find my ultimate joy. If I have flown into my own heaven, finding wisdom and freedom, where words are too heavy for the light ones, how could I not be fervent for eternity? For she alone is the one I love. For I love thee, O eternity. Fourth and last part, 61. The Ani sacrifice. Years passed over Zarathustra, and his hair turned white as he sat by his cave, gazing into the distance. His animals asked if he sought happiness, but Zarathustra replied that he no longer strove for happiness, but for his work. They noted that his happiness seemed heavy, like molten pitch. Zarathustra agreed, comparing it to the thickening honey in his veins. His animals suggested he ascend a high mountain, which he did, sending them home as he reached the summit. Alone, Zarathustra reflected that he spoke of sacrifices only as a ruse. He is a squanderer, not a sacrificer. He casts his happiness as bait, fishing for the strangest human fish, luring them to his height. Zarathustra awaits the signs of his down-going, but remains on the high mountain, patient and scornful, as he waits for his fate. He laughs at those who shout down from the mountains, for he is secure on eternal ground, waiting for the Zarathustra kingdom of 1,000 years. He casts his fishing hook into the abyss, seeking to draw up what belongs to him, laughing and scornful as he waits for the future to unfold around him. 62. The Cry of Distress. Zarathustra sat in front of his cave, tracing shadows when he noticed another shadow beside his own. It was the soothsayer, the proclaimer of the great weariness, whose face now bore a more ominous expression. They greeted each other, and the soothsayer warned Zarathustra that the waves of fummed distress were rising and would soon carry him away. A long, distressing cry echoed from the depths, which the soothsayer claimed was the cry of the higher man calling for Zarathustra. Alarmed, Zarathustra questioned this, but the soothsayer insisted it was time for Zarathustra to go to him. Zarathustra, though initially staggered, became resolute, denying the soothsayer's despair. He declared that there were still happy isles and decided to seek out the higher man in the forest, where he believed the cry originated. The soothsayer, knowing Zarathustra sought to rid himself of his company, warned that he would return to Zarathustra's cave in the evening. Zarathustra, in good spirits, invited him to join in the evening's joy, even offering honey to sweeten the soothsayer's mood. Thus, Zarathustra departed to find the higher man, leaving the soothsayer to await his return. 63. Talk with the Kings. After an hour in the mountains, Zarathustra saw 2 kings with crowns and purple girdles driving a laden ass. Astonished, he hid and muttered, "Strange! 2 kings and only 1 ass." The kings, hearing this, smiled and discussed their disdain for good society, which they found false and corrupt. They lamented that true nobility now resided in the coarse but noble peasant type. They had fled from the rabble and the pretensions of their own roles, disgusted by the falseness that surrounded them. Zarathustra, listening, stepped forward and introduced himself. The kings admitted they sought the higher man, one greater than themselves, to whom they would convey the ass. They acknowledged the tragedy when the mighty are not the first men, leading to a distorted world. Zarathustra, impressed by their wisdom, recited a rhyme about the decline of Rome, which delighted the kings. One king praised Zarathustra, confessing that despite their initial fear, his warlike words had stirred their father's blood within them, rekindling a desire for valor and conflict. They recalled how their ancestors longed for war and despised the long peace. Zarathustra, seeing their eagerness, felt a desire to mock but restrained himself. He invited the kings to wait in his cave, reminding them that the only remaining virtue of kings is their ability to wait. Thus spake Zarathustra. 64. The Leech. Zarathustra, deep in thought, unknowingly stepped on a man hidden in the forest, causing the man to cry out in pain and curse him. Startled, Zarathustra struck the man before quickly regaining his composure. He apologized and shared a parable, comparing their encounter to a wanderer stumbling upon a sleeping dog. The trodden man, initially angry, revealed he was lying by the swamp to study leeches, likening Zarathustra to a conscience leech, who also bit him. The man, who identified himself as the spiritually conscientious one, expressed admiration for Zarathustra, explaining that he rigorously investigates the brain of the leech as his life's work, valuing precision and honesty in his pursuit of knowledge. Zarathustra, impressed but pressed for time, invited the man to his cave, promising to make amends for stepping on him. He noted the bleeding man's dedication and resolved to see him again. Thus spake Zarathustra. 65. The Magician. As Zarathustra descended the path, he encountered a man writhing on the ground, crying out in distress. Zarathustra, thinking he had found the higher man, approached and tried to help, but the old man was lost in a frantic lament, cursing an unfamiliar god who tormented him. The man expressed his suffering and longing, accusing the god of torturing him. Unable to bear the lamentation, Zarathustra struck the man with his staff, accusing him of being a false actor. The old man, admitting the performance was an act, claimed he was testing Zarathustra. He revealed himself as a magician who sought to deceive, but was weary of his own lies. He confessed to Zarathustra that his pursuit of greatness had collapsed under the weight of his own deceit, and he was left disillusioned. Zarathustra, recognizing the old man's momentary honesty, honored his admission of failure, but remained skeptical. The magician confessed that he sought Zarathustra himself, seeking a genuine great man. Zarathustra directed him to his cave, but warned that greatness is rare in a world dominated by the populace. He then left the magician, comforted and amused by the encounter. Thus spake Zarathustra. 66. Out of service. After parting from the magician, Zarathustra encountered a tall, sorrowful man with a pale face. He recognized the man as a former priest and thought, "What do priests want in my domain?" As Zarathustra approached, the man revealed himself as the last pope, now lost and without purpose after the death of the old god he served. The old pope explained that he had come to the mountains to celebrate a final festival, but found only the death of a pious man he sought. He then determined to seek Zarathustra, the most pious of those who do not believe in God. Zarathustra admired the pope's hand, recognizing it as one that had dispensed blessings, but noted that he, Zarathustra, was the ungodliest. The pope confessed that he had served the old god until the end, witnessing the god's decline into weakness and pity. Zarathustra, acknowledging the pope's words, remarked on the god's equivocal nature and how he had died many kinds of death. Zarathustra declared that it was better to have no god than one so flawed. The pope, sensing Zarathustra's deep honesty, suggested that his piety had turned him against belief in God. He asked to stay with Zarathustra for a night, feeling that nowhere else would he feel better. Zarathustra, though surprised, agreed, but explained that he must leave to respond to a cry of distress. He offered the pope shelter in his cave, but admitted he could not lift the pope's melancholy. That old god is indeed dead, Zarathustra concluded. Thus spake Zarathustra. 67. The ugliest man. Zarathustra continued through the mountains, seeking the distressed sufferer, but found only desolation in a valley called Serpent Death. There he encountered a figure resembling a man, but grotesque and deformed. The figure, whom Zarathustra identified as the murderer of God, spoke in riddles, confessing his torment and seeking refuge from the pity of others. The ugliest man revealed his hatred for the God who had seen everything, including his deepest shame. He killed this God because he could not endure being constantly watched and judged. Zarathustra, though repelled, recognized the man's self-loathing as a form of greatness. Zarathustra invited the outcast to his cave, offering him a place to hide from human pity. He advised the man to speak with his animals, who might provide counsel. As Zarathustra departed, he pondered the depth of human self-contempt and wondered if this outcast was the higher man he had sought. "I love the great despisers," thought Zarathustra, "for man is something that must be surpassed." Thus spake Zarathustra. 68. The voluntary beggar. After leaving the ugliest man, Zarathustra felt cold and lonely. As he wandered, warmth returned to him, and he discovered a group of cattle listening to a man, the preacher on the mount, who was talking to them about finding happiness on earth. The preacher, a kind man with a gentle demeanor, explained that humans should learn from the cattle, especially the art of ruminating, as a way to overcome their current affliction of disgust. Recognizing Zarathustra, the preacher became emotional, praising him as the one who overcame great disgust. Zarathustra reminded the preacher that he had once renounced wealth and sought to give to the poor, only to be rejected. The preacher admitted that he had turned to animals like the cattle, finding peace and simplicity in their ways, away from the greed and corruption of the wealthy. Zarathustra, smiling, noted that the preacher's gentleness was more suited to a life of simplicity and kindness, not the harshness of his words. He invited the preacher to visit his cave and meet his own animals, promising him honey and hospitality. The preacher, touched by Zarathustra's kindness, reluctantly agreed to leave his beloved cattle, comparing Zarathustra's goodness to that of a cow. Zarathustra, amused, playfully chased the preacher away, telling him not to spoil him with flattery. 69. The Shadow. As Zarathustra walked alone, he was suddenly followed by a new voice, his shadow, calling out to him. Irritated by the crowding in his mountains, Zarathustra tried to escape, but the shadow persisted. Realizing the folly of his irritation, Zarathustra stopped and confronted the shadow, a thin, weary figure who had followed him for a long time. The shadow described himself as a wanderer without a goal, lost and disillusioned. He had followed Zarathustra, abandoning beliefs and values, and had become like a shadow, empty and aimless. He longed for a home but had found none, feeling eternally lost. Zarathustra, saddened, warned the shadow that its danger was great. Without a goal, it risked being seduced by narrow beliefs or delusions. He invited the shadow to rest in his cave, but resolved to run away again, seeking brightness and solitude. Thus spake Zarathustra. 70. Noontide. Zarathustra wandered alone, enjoying his solitude until he found a tree embraced by a vine, its yellow grapes tempting him. Instead of quenching his thirst, he lay down under the tree and fell into a deep, peaceful sleep, marveling at the world's perfection. As he drifted into slumber, he felt as though time had stopped and his soul was stretching out in contentment. He awoke briefly, only to fall asleep again, his soul resisting the urge to rise. In his dreamlike state, Zarathustra pondered the perfection of the moment and the fleeting nature of happiness. When he finally awakened fully, he found the sun still directly overhead, realizing he hadn't slept long but had experienced a profound sense of peace. Thus spake Zarathustra. 71. The Greeting. Zarathustra returned to his cave late in the afternoon, only to hear an unexpected cry of distress coming from within. Rushing inside, he found all those he had encountered earlier: kings, the magician, the pope, the beggar, his shadow, and others gathered together. His eagle and serpent were also present, the eagle ruffled and disquieted. Zarathustra addressed the group, acknowledging that their cry had led him to realize that the higher man he had sought all day was already in his cave. He welcomed them, offering security in his hospitality, yet noted that they seemed ill-suited for company, making each other's hearts fretful. He suggested they needed a jovial presence to make them laugh. The king on the right spoke, praising Zarathustra for humbling himself before them, uplifting their spirits, and comparing him to a tall, strong pine tree. He spoke of the growing longing for Zarathustra among many, and how their presence was a sign that even greater ones were on their way. Zarathustra, however, responded plainly, stating that while they might be higher men, they were neither high nor strong enough for him. He needed those who were built squarely in body and soul, triumphant and merry, laughing lions. He expressed his longing for his true children, the life trees of his will and hope, who had not yet arrived. Overcome with emotion, Zarathustra fell silent, and his guests stood confounded, except for the old soothsayer who made signs with his hands. 72. The Supper. At this point, the soothsayer interrupted Zarathustra, urgently seizing his hand. Zarathustra, one thing is more necessary than others. Did you not invite us to the table? We cannot be fed merely with discourses. You've thought too much of dangers, but not of my danger, perishing of hunger and thirst. I need wine, not water. The king on the left then spoke. We've brought enough wine, an entire assload of it, but we lack bread. Zarathustra laughed. Anchorites lack bread, but we have lambs to slaughter and cook with sage, along with roots, fruits, and nuts. Whoever wishes to eat with us must work, even kings. Here, even a king may be a cook. This pleased everyone except the voluntary beggar, who objected to the feast. Zarathustra, you glutton, do we climb mountains for such feasts? Now I understand why you taught, blessed be moderate poverty. Zarathustra replied, be of good cheer and follow your customs. I am a law for mine own, not for all. My followers must be strong, joyous in fight and feast, ready for the hardest tasks. We take the best, food, sky, thoughts, women. The king on the right remarked, strange to hear such sensible things from a wise man. The ass with ill will said, yea. Thus began the long repast called the supper, where nothing else was spoken of but the higher man. 73. The higher man. When I first came to men, I made the folly of appearing in the marketplace, speaking to all, but reaching none. I realized the futility of the marketplace and its noise. Ye higher men, I say, on the marketplace, no one believes in higher men. They say we are all equal, but we will not be equal before the populace. God is dead, and now the higher man becomes master. Take heart, ye higher men. The mountain of the human future now labors for the Superman to live. I ask not how man is to be maintained, but how he is to be surpassed. The Superman, not man, is what I have at heart. You higher men despise the petty virtues and submit not to the comfort of the masses. Have courage, not before witnesses, but the courage that conquers fear and grasps the abyss. Man is evil, they say, and I rejoice in great sin as my consolation. The Superman's best requires the evilest in man. Do not seek to be carried aloft, use your own legs. Even if you ride high, your lame foot is with you. If you would go high, do not sit on others' backs. Highest is reached by your own power. Ye creating ones, remember, you are pregnant with your own child. Do not act for your neighbor, but for your creation. Your self-seeking shelters and nourishes the fruit of your love. Virtue belongs with your work, your will, not imposed from outside. Do not be virtuous beyond your powers, nor seek the improbable. Walk in the footsteps of your Father's virtue. Those who would be first may become last if they demand too much of themselves. Solitude brings out the brute in many. Beware of it. Lift up your hearts, ye higher men, and do not forget your legs. Laugh at yourselves and learn to dance beyond your failures. The worst thing in you is that you have not learned to dance as you ought. Many things are still possible. Learn to laugh beyond yourselves. This crown of laughter, this rose garland crown I cast to you, my brethren. Laughing have I consecrated it. Learn, I pray you, to laugh. 74. The Song of Melancholy. After speaking, Zarathustra stepped out of his cave, seeking fresh air and calling for his animals, the eagle and the serpent. He remarked how much he preferred their pure company to that of the higher men. The animals pressed close to him, and they enjoyed the fresh air together, finding it better than the company of men. Meanwhile, the old magician, seizing the opportunity, addressed the higher men. He admitted his deceitful, melancholy nature, which he couldn't resist, and acknowledged his love-hate relationship with Zarathustra. His spirit, driven by twilight melancholy, compelled him to conjure up a performance. The magician then began to sing a melancholic, reflective poem, lamenting his own nature and the conflict between truth and deception. the fool and the poet. He described the poet's desires as wild, predatory, and insatiable, akin to eagles and panthers, mocking the softness of lambs. The poet's blessedness lies in this predatory nature, finding joy in rending and laughing, reveling in the blessedness of being both a fool and a poet. The magician's song ended with a reflection on his descent into shadow, driven by his longing and weariness of the day, scorched by truth and yearning for escape. He concluded by lamenting his fate as mere fool, mere poet. 75. Science. The magician's melancholy song entranced everyone except the conscientious one, who seized the harp and cried, "Air! Let in Zarathustra! You make this cave sultry and poisonous, old magician. You seduce us back into prisons with your deceitful magic." The magician, undeterred, replied calmly, "Good songs need silence afterward. Perhaps you did not understand my song. There is little magic in you." The conscientious one retorted, "You flatter me by separating me from your magic, but I see the others still caught as if watching a bad dance. You higher men seem to crave insecurity and danger, longing for the wildest life. But fear is the foundation of man, and from fear grew my virtue, science. Fear of that beast within, as Zarathustra calls it, became subtle and intellectual, now called science." Zarathustra, returning to the cave, threw roses at the conscientious one, laughing at his truths. He exclaimed, "Fear is an exception for us. Courage and adventure are the true history of man, who envied and stole the virtues of wild animals. This courage, now subtle and intellectual, is called Zarathustra." All present laughed and exclaimed in agreement. The magician, joining in, admitted his spirit was a deceiver and urged everyone to be of good cheer. He acknowledged that Zarathustra, though he may look with a critical eye now, would soon return to love and praise, as he cannot live long without folly. The higher men applauded, and Zarathustra mischievously shook hands with his friends, as if apologizing. Yet as he reached the door, he longed for the fresh air outside and his animals, wishing to slip away. 76. Among daughters of the desert. "Stay with us," implored the wanderer, Zarathustra's shadow, lest old melancholy returns. "The magician has given us his worst for our good, and the pious pope weeps, sinking into sorrow once more. These kings, though now dignified, might reignite the bad game of drifting clouds, damp melancholy, stolen suns, and howling autumn winds. Abide with us, O Zarathustra. Hidden misery yearns to speak amidst the evening clouds and damp air. You have nourished us with strong sustenance and wise proverbs. Protect us from weak spirits anew. Only you make the air around you pure. Never have I found such invigorating air as in your cave. Though I've traveled many lands, none delighted my nostrils like yours. Forgive my old memories, my songs among desert maidens where clear oriental air reigned, free from Europe's gloom. I loved those maidens and their cloudless heavens, sitting profound and secretive, like riddles to please with after-dinner psalms." The wanderer, seizing the magician's harp, surveyed calmly, inhaling the air anew, then began to roar in song. "The deserts grow. Woe him who doth them hide. Ha, solemnly Afric manner, a lion's worthy howl, or a virtuous howl monkey's cry, but to you, dear maidens, I grant a seat beneath the palm trees. Selah. Wonderful. Here I sit near the desert, yet far from it, swallowed by a small oasis, its mouth agape, sweetest of all. I fell right in among you, dear maidens. Selah. Hail to the whale's belly, the loveliest oasis belly, as I leave old Europe, doubting more than any married woman. May the Lord improve it. Amen. Here in the oasis, like a sweet date for maidens longing, youthful ice-cold front teeth, pine hearts of ardent fruits, Scylla. To southern fruits I lie by flying insects and childish wishes, surrounded by you, silent maidens Dudu and Suleika, round sphinxed, merging feelings. Forgive my speech sins. I sit here drinking paradisal air, golden mottled from lunar orb, yet I doubt Europe more than any married woman. May the Lord improve it. Amen. Drinking. Finest air, nostrils like goblets, lacking future and memories. I sit here, dear maidens, watching the palm tree bow like a dance girl. It bends on one leg. Has she forgotten the other? I search in vain for the missing leg. Alas, lost. Who? It's gone forever, perhaps to a leonine monster, or nibbled away. Woeful. Scylla. Weep not, gentle spirits. Weep no more, Dudu. Be bold, Suleika. Strengthen your hearts with moral honor, European honor. Roar your virtue like a lion near desert maidens, more fervent than Europe's hunger. Now I stand here as European, needing God's help. Amen. The deserts grow. Woe him who doth them hide. 77. The Awakening. After the wanderer's song, the cave erupted in laughter and noise, with even the ass joining in. Zarathustra felt a mix of joy and scorn for his guests, relieved that their distress seemed to fade. He slipped outside, noting that while they no longer cried out in pain, they still wept. Reflecting on their laughter, he recognized it wasn't his own, but that didn't matter. These men, though recovering, were finding joy in learning to laugh at themselves, free from the spirit of gravity. Zarathustra celebrated this as a victory and watched the day end in peace. Suddenly, the cave fell silent, and a sweet incense filled the air. Curious, Zarathustra peeked inside and was shocked to see all the higher men, kings, the pope, the magician, the beggar, and others, praying like children to the ass. The ugliest man then began a strange litany praising the ass, who brayed "Ye-a" after each line. The litany celebrated the ass's patience, simplicity, and acceptance, portraying him as a wise and godlike figure. The ass, in his humble gray form, never says nay but always yea, embracing the world in his own image, simple and innocent. 78. The Ass Festival. Zarathustra, unable to contain himself, loudly mocked his guests' litany and rushed into the cave. He pulled them from their prayer, scolding them for their absurd worship of the ass. The old pope justified it, claiming it was better to worship God in any form than none at all. The wanderer and shadow confessed that the old god had been revived, blaming the ugliest man. The magician admitted his foolishness, and the spiritually conscientious one found solace in the spectacle, suggesting that even Zarathustra could fall into folly through excess wisdom. Turning to the ugliest man, Zarathustra questioned his role in reviving the old god. The man responded with a cryptic answer, reminding Zarathustra that laughter, not wrath, kills most effectively. Zarathustra, surprised by their playful responses, called them out for pretending to be pious. He encouraged them to embrace their joy and foolishness, but to leave behind the childishness in his cave. He urged them to celebrate life on earth, not seek the kingdom of heaven. Finally, he praised their newfound joy, suggesting they commemorate the night and the ass festival they had created in his presence. 79. The Drunken Song. Zarathustra led the ugliest man into the night, astonishing the higher men with their contentment. The ugliest man, grateful for his day with Zarathustra, declared his newfound love for life, prompting others to thank Zarathustra. Overwhelmed, Zarathustra, in a drunken state, silenced the crowd to listen to a clock bell. He called them thrice, urging them to wander into the night. At midnight, Zarathustra spoke of deep wells, howling dogs, and the moon. He questioned who would master the world, urging the higher men to listen. The midnight voice sang of flight, dance, and the world's depth, praising joy and asserting its superiority over woe. It declared joy's longing for eternity and questioned its own nature, soothsayer, dreamer, or drunkard. It proclaimed midnight as midday, linking joy and woe, urging love for the world in its entirety. The voice concluded with Zarathustra's roundelay, "O man, take heed, what saith deep midnight's voice indeed? I slept my sleep from deepest dream I've woke and plead. The world is deep, and deeper than the day could read. Deep is its woe, joy, deeper still than grief can be. Woe saith, hence, go, but joys all want eternity, want deep, profound eternity." 80. The Sign. In the morning, Zarathustra, invigorated, emerged from his cave like a radiant sun. He mused on the necessity of his audience. What is happiness if there are none to receive it? They still sleep while I am awake, waiting for proper companions. As he observed the sun and his animals, a sudden flurry of birds and a powerful lion greeted him. The lion, a symbol of his readiness, rested affectionately by his side. Zarathustra, moved by this display of loyalty and love, wept tears of joy, overwhelmed by the presence of his true companions. When the higher men, awakened and eager to meet Zarathustra, arrived, they were frightened away by the lion's roar. Left alone, Zarathustra reflected on the soothsayer's prophecy of distress and his own evolving purpose. What is suffering to me now? I seek not happiness, but my work, he concluded. With renewed determination, Zarathustra embraced the new day, ready to commence his work as the sun ascended.